Civilization 7 is revolutionizing its storytelling with deeper events, connecting the ages, and changing the game. We've just learned about it from what is only the fourth direct info dump from the developer Firaxis. These are few and far between. So let's explore the dynamic narrative events and a brand new Civ 7 gameplay trailer that just dropped. We begin with what they call the Emergent narrative system in Civilization 7, and it has certainly, seemingly changed the game. In what is the fourth developer diary, they say that the game is launching in just over 2 months, and we should expect more news to come, by the way, as we move through what is a quote-unquote action-packed December. But what is an emergent narrative system? What do these buzzwords actually mean? Narrative obviously refers to story and plot, and they highlight that they've taken some inspiration from previous games, like the Outback Tycoon scenario in Civilization 6, where we heard stories emerge a little bit better, decision-making, narrative driving the game. They also mention in the next paragraph that they've learned a little bit from Civ 6's gossip mechanics, where we were able to get a little bit of insight into what other players were doing. This new system was initially created to be triggered by player behavior, meant to provide us with a snapshot of what might be happening to individuals within our empire and give us, say, 2 or 3 choices. No answer is necessarily wrong, but of course there'll always be an opportunity cost to how these events play out. It's not just that simple though. They say as the system developed, they started to use it in place or to sort of boost and bolster other mechanics like goody huts or discoveries, as well as the crises events that we discussed earlier this week, and what they call systemically generated content, which, you know, it's a little wordy, but it's quite interesting. So let's get into the nuts and bolts then. How does this new emergent narrative system work? Well, the good news is it tracks major movements in the game. Think technological advancement, achievements, combat, battles, and these events will respond to how you're playing, to your specific playthrough. Using a modifier system of a combination of requirements and effects, it seems like this will help to build that story and crucially, as we'll find out just slightly later, bridge us through the ages. As some of these events can be triggered by our choice of leader, as well as our choice of civilization, or specifically how we move around the game, how we play the game, and the kinds of moments that we run into. Firaxis are applying narrative tags in some cases, allowing them to trigger narrative events that call back to things crucially that have happened in past ages. They say this is enormously powerful as it enables their writers to tell more granular and specific stories, to answer specific questions like, how did a warmonger in the Antiquity Age then become peaceful? Should there be some kind of consequence, ramification, and storytelling to do with that? The answer is yes. From the examples you've already seen on screen and that we've witnessed in previous live streams, these do indeed offer gameplay bonuses like yields or combat buffs, and they talk about this detail a little bit more inside of the developer diary. They talk about how they don't want them to be overcomplicated or overshadow the rest of the game. The choices should feel approximately equal, and generally they'll be pretty transparent. You'll see what you're getting up front. However, there is the occasional one where the results may be hidden. And Firaxis have said there'll be 3 different broad types of events that they'll be including. The first one you might be particularly excited about: historical events. These are largely meant to align with your gameplay, what you discovered in an earlier era. They give examples like medicinal discoveries, daring prisoner escapes, riots, artistic feuds, and enormous Mongol armies. The second type are what-if scenarios, a little bit more sandboxy, a little bit more creative perhaps, though they don't give too many specific examples here, other than to kind of question, you know, what if this leader did that? Or what if this leader's invasion wasn't successful? Finally, there are unique gameplay moments, events that are directly tied to what you've done in an age. Did you get a golden age with certain traditions active? What about your religious benefits? Did you suffer damage from a war? What you've done will be represented using the game's narrative events, and I think that that is a big win. How it plays out, the extent to which it plays out, of course we don't yet know, but this information to me seems very promising. There are also a couple of interesting subsets of their dynamic narrative events. The first one of my favourites, goody hunts, or discoveries as they're called. A subset of narrative events that occur on the map, replacing goody hunts from previous games. Instead of just getting a reward, you'll get an option, a short snippet of text describing what's going on, putting it into the context of the world. And you'll have a choice between bonuses. Think Shoshone from Civilization 5, but of course stepped up inside of the Civ 7 narrative game. The second subset here are what they call systemic events, reoccurring gameplay moments, like those crises events that occur at the end of each age, or interestingly gifts from these dudes, independent powers, using the narrative system to try and make those gifts feel a little bit less just like some random notification on the side of your screen, and a little bit more involved with the world. And they give a little bit more detail about this in the subsequent paragraph. The systemic narrative events tend to be informative. Their purpose is to add narrative flair and explain the sort of why and how, to create a story around those intrinsically systemic parts of the game, like the crisis events. For example, if we think about those independent powers again, as you improve your relationships with them, you'll get a gift. At one point, as I mentioned before, the gift was just sort of floating there, but they found that people in their QA team would miss it. By bringing it into the narrative system, it's no longer just a dumb little notification, but instead part of a broader story. Before we move on to the new gameplay trailer that was also just dropped this morning, there is one final section in the developer diary entitled, What's Next? And unfortunately, it says literally nothing about what is next, other than to state the obvious that Civ 7 launches on the 11th of February 2025. So not a lot of detail about what is actually next there. Though in its defense, it does have one incredible detail that I'm surprised was buried inside of the paragraph of nothingness. At launch, there will be over 1,000 narrative events. That seems like a pretty decent roster to me. Moving swiftly along now, we come to the new gameplay trailer, which was also just released today, as I mentioned earlier in the video. This one was released on the PlayStation blog, and it is a console trailer. We've seen it for Nintendo Switch. This one, though, actually showcases, as you can see, some real gameplay. Inside of the PlayStation blog post, there wasn't really a lot of extra or new information. In many ways, it seemed like a sort of a first introduction to Civ. However, a couple of details that are worth noting. Firstly, they say they've taken the extra step of creating graphics renderers for each platform in-house. So, the graphic engine is fully optimized for both PS5 and the now seemingly ancient PlayStation 4. Still probably faster than the Switch though. Specifically, on the console, the controller-based UI, they've incorporated a radial menu that allows for quicker navigation between the most frequently used systems. Basically, they've taken that little bit of the UI from down the bottom right of the screen and brought it up and made it that big thing. They say that the developers have also come up with some fun and unique ways to use the DualSense controller's haptic feedback. If you somehow haven't turned that off, you'll be able to feel the controller vibrate for different things, like a war horn's call, founding a new city, etc. And that was really about all of the extra information that we received in that blog post. Some insights into potentially the extra accessibility and user function that will be enabled thanks to the console versions and the controller-based UI. Thank you very much for joining me in what was a surprisingly interesting day for Civ 7. Again, one of those rare once-a-month developer diaries that I wouldn't be surprised if we see them start to ramp it up a bit now. They've only released 4 in like 4 months. It seems a bit low to me. I'd expect more to come, that frequency to ramp up, and of course also that new trailer, those console insights. Thank you for being here. Thank you also for supporting the Jingle Jam. A gentle reminder, if you'd like to donate to charity this holiday season, there are still game keys available for those who donate 35 quid or more, or you could just drop a donation. We're a little way off our fundraising target, but we have raised some great money for charity so far. Thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.